Hey, happy Mother's Day to all of you out there. Thank you so much for mothering. Mothering is a verb, not a noun, just so you know. It's not just what you are, it's what you do. Go moms. I am standing here today, no doubt, because years ago, someone volunteered and someone spent some time to invest in my life and just serve me, to just volunteer for me. When I was growing up in church, I had a student director, and this is a kind of an artful rendering of from his Facebook page. But his name is Kent Greer, and Kent Greer was my student leader at the church I grew up at, and he came into our ministry every single Wednesday night at the church and had another job, wife, kids, but he gave time, and he was the kind of person that was so fun to be around, and I was so interested in just knowing him as a friend that I am certain that the impact he had on my life is one of the reasons I'm here today. And one of the things that he did that was so remarkable that just captured my heart as a student was Kent. Here's another picture of him at a game. Kent, it was a giant guy. He played linebacker for Butler, and he was just such an amazing guy. But one thing he did that blew my mind was he could stick his whole fist in his mouth. And stupid human tricks go a long way in student ministry. And so Kent Greer, he is one of the reasons that I am here. Someone that volunteered for me years and years ago and reached me. And because of his time in my life, I've spent time giving back in different ways. Most of us, if we're honest, we live in this world where we're thinking we have this cup and we're going to get something for it. Like we're going to get something put in it. We think sometimes we'll wake up in the morning and we'll go, what am I going to get today? Like, am I going to get that promotion? Am I going to get into that relationship? Am I going to get that money? Am I going to get that position? Am I going to get that role? We live in a world that says, what are you going to get? In another way, a lot of us like show up every single day like, what's in it for me? Like, what am I going to get? And the reality is like, it's counterintuitive to say in the church, like, you know, you need to go and get. It's important that you get. Like, you're supposed to be full, and you're supposed to get your bucket full, and you're supposed to have your soul filled, and we're all supposed to be filled up to a certain point. But if we're honest, we live in this thing where it's like we're actually so full that we just keep overflowing. And the reality is that we're supposed to move into a different paradigm where we serve and we know how we're filled and we start to give back. But most of us like just get. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? I mean, you understand in church world, just in church world, and this is probably in any type of social or club, or if the golf club or the country club or the gym. I mean, most of those types of things are set up with this mentality. Here's what you're going to get. You're going to get a good workout, a good pump. You're going to get it. Here's what you get. You get 3 meals a week and social golf. Here's what you get. We live in a world that's like I'm gonna get something. I want to know what I'm going to get. And so it's tough for us to flip. And in the church, it's very much that way. And what I want to talk about today is that idea of showing up to anything with, here's my cup, fill me up. I came to get. I came to receive something, is extremely normal. And a hallmark, if not the hallmark, of the Christian faith is the opposite of that. Is the opposite of what do I get? It's to actually start to think, what can I give? What can I be a part of? What can I do? How can I give? And so many of us are in here today, and we view this kind of life through the lens of get with everything. In a relationship, hey, what am I going to get from them? What are they going to give me? Everywhere we go, we just live in this get. I got to get filled up. And what Jesus does for us is he says this whole life, everything about it is different. It's different than that. And so I want to take us down just a path just to kind of look at like where events took place that brought us to where we are today. And in the book of Mark, so if you have, a Bible, or I'm going to put this up on the screen, or if you're watching online, like you can pull it up on Google. But in the book of Mark, Jesus is towards the end of his ministry in Mark chapter 10. And in Mark chapter 10, he has told a bunch of people several times towards the end, chapters 8 and 9, that he's going to go to Jerusalem and that he's going to die. He's going to die. And one of the times when he says, I'm going to go to Jerusalem and I'm going to die, Peter, who if you didn't grow up in the church, is a famous follower of Jesus, Peter actually challenges him. Now, the thing that makes that interesting when you look a little bit deeper is that the book of Mark was written by a guy named Mark. A lot of people think John Mark is his name, but it's a guy named Mark who was not someone who was an eyewitness of Jesus. But people believe, scholars believe, that Peter spent time with Mark. And so the book of Mark is often sometimes viewed as like Peter's gospel. And so Peter is having this story retold by a guy who spent time with him and then writes it down, 30 years after Jesus rose from the dead and went up into heaven. And so what Mark writes about Peter, and just get the story, Peter told him this story. He's like, hey man, and then this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. And he's writing all about these events of Jesus. And one of the times Jesus said, hey, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to get turned over to the chief priests, and I'm going to be crucified, and I'm going to die. I'm going to raise from the dead. And one of the times Peter, and you can read this, he gets up and says, no, you're not. You are not. That is not going to happen. And in that moment, what Jesus is living his life for, what he's there to explain is, I came to do something. I'm on a mission. I came to give. And Peter stands up and says, no, you're not going to give. And Jesus says something that's incredible. He says to Peter, get behind me, Satan, which is a lot like, what? Get behind me. In other words, Jesus says, you getting in the way of my giving is getting in the way of who I am and what I exist to do. And the disciples, the disciples, the followers of Jesus, after probably 3 years, his closest, Peter, is saying, no, you're not going to die. No, you're not going to give. He doesn't even understand the nature of Jesus and what he came to do. And Jesus equates someone who tries to stop him from giving with demons. It's like Jesus says, dude, this is a big deal. Like, I have a big mission and a big plan, and I'm going to go and do this. And Peter says, no. And he says, dude, that is not God's kingdom. That is not what this is about. A little bit later, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John. Now, there's 12 disciples, and then there was 3 that were the closest, Peter, James, and John. And they're called the sons of thunder. And there's a bunch of different reasons why they're called the sons of thunder, but one of them is that Jesus grabs the 3 of them one time, and then you can read about this in Mark, just before Mark chapter 10, he takes them to a mountain, and Jesus, in front of Peter, James, and John, he transforms into this kind of heavenly figure where his clothes turn white, and he looks somewhat heavenly, divine, something so dramatic and beautiful that they fall on the ground, they worship. These guys are Old Testament and they're Jews, and they have this whole history of like building monuments. And in the moment, they're like, oh, we should build a monument to him. And then they fall on the ground, and then they wake back up, and Jesus is standing there normal again. And while he's like up there transfigured, they're like wondering, like, what is this all about? And a voice comes from heaven and says, this is Jesus. Listen to him. Listen to him. So then Peter, James, and John are like, oh my word. And then he turns normal. It's like, yeah, God just told you to listen to me. You need to listen to me. You need to do what I say. You need to listen to what I say. I'm going to teach you some amazing things. Well, after Peter is kind of the guy that Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And then James and John and Peter are up on this mountain of transfiguration. James and John, they kind of like go to Jesus with Peter not there. And Jesus has just got done saying for the third time, I'm going to go to Jerusalem and I'm going to die. I'm going to be handed over and I'm going to die and I'm going to be crucified and then I'm going to raise from the dead. And so they know what happened the last time, that got brought up with Peter. So James and John go over to Jesus and they corner Jesus alone. Now, understand, Jesus has done tons of ministry. There's a lot of people around. It's not just the 12. It's a lot of people following him on the way to Jerusalem for the Passover. It's hard to explain, but a lot of people in the region think that Jesus is going to be the king and take over the Romans and take over the Jewish leadership. They think he's going to be that. So John and James are like, look at all these people and look at what he just said. And they pull him aside and they say, Jesus, we want you to do us a favor. They say, Jesus, we want you to do something for us. Will you do something for us? And Jesus goes, what do you want me to do for you? And they say, when you go to Jerusalem, when we go there, would you, when you take your throne, would you let us sit on your right and your left hand? And Jesus goes, first of all, he says to him, you don't know what you're asking. Like, you don't know what it means to be at my right and left hand. And then he says, in that spot that I'm going to occupy as the center, there's something that I have to do that represents why I sit there, and it's not just to be a prominent figure. Essentially, James and John are going, Jesus, you're going to go be the king. Can we get something out of this? What can we get from you? We want a position of prominence while you are seated on this throne. Now, in their minds, they did not completely understand that Jesus was going to die on a cross, and they did not believe he was going to raise from the dead. We know that because Easter morning, no one was there to wait for him. Like, they did not get it. They just believed with all the stuff that they have seen, the miracles, he's going to go be a king. And so what they are thinking is just like you and me. Hey, you're going to rise. Like, you're going to become this king. You're going to like get, prominence. Can we get a little something from that? Can we get some of that? And Jesus goes, first of all, you don't know how I'm going to end up in that spot because you don't understand what it means to be in that spot. You think I'm just going to go sit on a throne in Jerusalem. It's not at all what's going to happen. I'm going to sit on people's hearts because I'm going to die for them. It's just hard to explain. But you're not going to be able to like even join me there because I don't even get to decide who sits at my right and my left hand. My Father decides kind of who sits at my right and left hand. And then they push back, and then Jesus says, okay, fine, you will actually go through the same torture that gets me to that spot. And as soon as he says, you guys will basically, he says it in a much more poetic language for that time. As soon as you drink the same cup that I'm going to drink, which is the idea of drinking out of a cup was an idea of like basically sacrifice and pain and kind of taking on this burden. When you drink that cup, then you'll get to go through what I went through. But you're not going to get to sit next to me. When that gets said, all the rest of the disciples, the other 10, including Peter, are like misunderstanding and they get frustrated. They're like, what? They're gonna get to do what you did? You get to do what they, what do you mean? What do you mean? We want to get something too. We want to get something too. They ask for something, they misunderstand it, they think that he's giving them something. And then it says in the text, and it's amazing, in John chapter 10, verse 42, after this whole interaction, there's all these people following Jesus to Jerusalem. There's his closest disciples. Jesus stops and basically drives a wedge in between all the people, hundreds of people, kind of caravanning, and then his 12 disciples. And he pulls them apart. He pulls them aside and he's like, you guys, you are looking for something. You want to get something. Like, you have this idea that this whole journey of mine is so that I can go sit on a throne in your Jerusalem, and one of you, two of you want to sit with me. You're just trying to get your cup filled. You're just trying to have prominence. You're just trying to have importance. He's like, he pulls them aside, it says, and he's like, this is not the way that my kingdom and that people who follow me even think. It's almost like if you ask Jesus, he's like frustrated. In the language, like he pulls them together. He's like, guys, seriously, everybody's watching now. All these people are here and you're asking for a prominent spot. Are you serious? Like he pulls them aside, and this is what happens in Mark chapter 10. Jesus called them together and said, called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers, this idea here is those who look important. Those who look important. Rulers of the Gentiles. All that means is people who aren't in the family of God. And in his context, he's basically going to redo that paradigm and say, everyone who doesn't follow Jesus, everyone who doesn't follow me, everyone who's not a Christian, the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. That means they're boastful, they're prideful, they're arrogant. They love the fact that they have a position of prominence. They have a position of authority. They've elevated it. They've received something good, and they think that they're better than everyone else. They're over the top. They look down and go, ha, 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 I'm the leader of you. They boss people around. They think that they're more valuable. They live to get. They want to climb the ladder and be the most important. Regardless of religion, lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. And then there's the guys who are like the big regional directors, the emperors, the kings that basically walk around and they live to receive. You see, in this picture, when Roman leadership would come to Jerusalem, to oversee what's going on because it was a Roman province, they would get carried in and they would get put in a palace. And they would receive food and water and refreshment. And then all the people in the Roman, military and the Roman political system would do anything they could to be right next to the leadership because, man, if we're with him, then we're with them, and we're powerful and we're important and we're leaders. And Peter and James and John specifically have seen this before, and they want to be like, can we just be on your, on your coattails? Because if you're going to receive all this goodness when you show up like a king like the other leaders do, then man, we're going to get it too. We're going to get it too. And so now you have people that are on top of that just kind of come in and waltz in, and they're like, oh, we want to be with the guy at the top. We want to get. Think about the question, will you let us sit with you? And then Jesus is like, this idea of being a leader, of being someone important, just because you receive things, just because you exist to have a position of prominence, this could not be more different or opposite than the nature of my kingdom and who I am. This is what Jesus says. He says, not so with you. Wait a minute. So you're the king, right? Yeah, I'm the king. So we're all going to town, right? We're the sons of thunder, right? Yeah, you're the sons of thunder. Well, don't we get to sit in a position of authority and have and receive and get all these accolades and get refreshments and be taken care of and be the center of attention and have and be and important and value and da-da-da-da-da? No. Totally different paradigm. Not so with you. You see, your attitude is not one to get. We're not here to get. We're not here to have that position. We're not here to have that spot. We're totally different. So you get the picture? They're like, hey, you're going to be the king. He says, I'm going to go die, and I'm going to be glorified, and da-da-da-da. They think glorified means you're going to get the throne. And then they're like, well, if you're getting the throne, can we be with you on the throne? And he's like, well, I'm not getting that throne. I'm getting a different kind of a throne that you actually can't get because I'm the Messiah, and I'm going to die, and I get to go to that spot. But you can't get that anyway. I don't get to decide, and you are looking at this all wrong. That's the way the Gentiles, when they come to town, they get what they want. They get. You're going to walk with me into town. And it's going to be bad. You're going to scatter. I'm not going to get the position you think. You're probably going to be afraid. And then eventually you'll drink the same cup and you'll see that this whole thing is different. Not so with you. In that moment when he says not so with you, he's saying everything you think that represents power, authority, wisdom, leadership is different for us. It's different for followers of me. It's not the same. Instead, look what he says, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. So all the people that do the fanning, all the people that wash the feet, all the people that do the feeding, those are the great ones? Yeah. So wait a minute. So you are saying that we need to be a servant? He's like, yeah, if you want to be that great thing, you have to start to give. You have to start to serve. You will not gain what you think is important by just finding and getting. You actually have to give. You actually have to serve. What? Jesus, we've been following you for 2.5 years, and now you're telling us that, like, this doesn't end up with, like, some triumph of us sitting in the palace together, laying back, eating grapes? No, not even close. That's not what this is. Whoever wants to become great. You want to become great? I want to become great. We all want to become great. We all want to get. We think I got to get. I want to get great. I'm going to get things. I'm going to do things. I'm going to have importance. You want to become great. And you have to serve. What? I just want to become great, Jesus, because I'm with you. Can you just give me the spot? Think about the question. Can we just sit next to you in your kingdom? Oh, you want greatness. You want to get greatness just because you know me? No. You get greatness by serving. Look what he goes on. He says, this just adds to it. And whoever wants to be first must be the slave. Now, to you and me, like we have like in our conscious, in our nation, like this idea of slavery and how awful it was and the implications of it even today and how horrible it was and the Civil War and what slavery meant and the slave trade and all that. This is a community of people who exists with slaves. And slaves are horribly treated, and they basically don't have a right. And in the language, when it says you have to be a slave is someone who doesn't have any rights or privileges to make their own decisions. So a slave goes to their master and says, hey, can I go eat? Yes, you may go eat. Hey, can I go wash? Yes, you may go wash. Hey, can I go spend some time with my kids? Yes, you may go spend some time with your kids. Hey, can I take a break? No, you can't. I mean, that's what it was. And what Jesus is saying here is he's like, you guys are asking for this spot. You're asking to get. I'm telling you that you have to serve and you have to be a slave. And people who served and were slaves in that society didn't do it voluntarily. They did it because they were born in the wrong family. And Jesus says to them, you have to choose to be a volunteer. You have to choose to serve. We don't have to do that. We're with you. You're the king. No. I'm a different type of king. You have to step up to say, I'm going to do this because I want to be great, and I guess this is God's way, and it's different. And then he says, I'm not just asking you to do this. I want you to see this is me. This is me. This is me. Look what he says. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served. Wait a minute. So Jesus, you didn't show up to earth to like get your cup filled. You didn't come to serve to get. You didn't come to earth to like sit in a prominent spot. You didn't come to earth to be a king. No. I actually left a throne so that I could serve you. So that I could serve you and essentially I could be your slave, because in a spiritual sense, Every one of us stands before God as a master of sorts that says, I need serious help. I need someone to take away my sin. And Jesus says, I will be that. I will take away your sin. And he volunteers to do it, to be the lowliest, to give his life. He didn't come to be served. He didn't show up to get. He showed up to give. But to serve, and look what it says, and give. He didn't come to get. He came to give what? His life, his entire life, his blood, his sweat, his tears, his time, his energy, his effort. The whole kingdom is I'm going to give, I'm going to serve, I'm going to be a slave, I'm going to put people in my mind. And then he says this, and this is something that's so easy to skip over if you've never read this. He says, I'm going to serve and I'm going to give my life as a ransom for who? Many. I want you to get the picture here. They're asking for a prominent position. He's like, there's no prominent position. The prominent position is me on the cross dying, and then I take the throne of their hearts, and you don't understand what this is. And way, way later, there'll be like a real kingdom, but for now, like there's this bigger problem, and the only way it gets solved is with serving. And you guys think you want to sit next to me. You don't understand what it means to actually be in my kingdom, to be in my paradigm, to lead as a follower of me. It looks totally different than all the other leaders you've ever seen, watched, or experienced. And then they go, can we have that spot? Can we have that spot? Jesus pulls them all together. Guys, what? Just listen. The world does it a certain way. They look for stuff, they try to get stuff, they look for great positions, they look for great prominence, they look for titles and authority and all these different things. And then they boast about it. They just bask in the fact that they're at the top and everyone else is below. But that's not my kingdom. That's not me. So if you want to be a disciple of me, you have to think about this completely differently. And then think about this. He pulls them together. He says, I didn't come to be served, but to serve and to become the slave for so many people. I've become a slave to give my life. And then he says, I came to give my life as a ransom for many. For many. He doesn't say, guys, Peter, I'm going to give my life for you. John, I'm going to give my life for you. Nathaniel, I'm going to give my life for you. Philip, I'm going to give my life for you. He says, hey guys, I'm going to give my life for many. I am going to give my life for a bunch of people that you don't know. I'm going to give my life for many. I'm going to give my life for people who haven't been born yet. I'm going to give my life. I'm going to give my time. I'm going to serve for people who don't exist, who haven't heard about me. That's why I'm here. They're all like, man, he's not even saying he's doing it for us. He's like, oh, I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for people that no one knows yet. And in that moment, what Jesus says, he says, I am going to volunteer. I am going to step up. I am going to do this thing that affects people that I will never see face to face on this planet. And you guys will then go do that too. And you'll volunteer, and the new people will volunteer, and then volunteer, and then volunteer, and then volunteer, and then volunteer, all until we get to 514 Church. And every single one of us is sitting in this room today because of a volunteer. And that volunteer is Jesus. He gave his life so that they would give his life, so that they would give his life, so that they would give his life, and then the they adds up to the many. And Jesus is like, that's what I did. I'm building a multitude. I'm building a church of people who follow me, and I'm laying my life down. I'm serving, I'm volunteering, and because I do that, they will join the church. You need to understand something. Jewish culture and this time in the world, and for these followers of Jesus, the Jewish culture is an insider-based culture. They were separate. They were God's people. They were supposed to eradicate all the different nations. They were for them, set apart, for us, by us, for God. That's the whole Old Testament. Us, God's people, insider, take care of us, do what we should do for us. Jesus comes in, he steps right into the middle of the Jewish world that turns its nose inside, that thinks about itself, that goes, it's all about us, and it's all about us serving God, and it's all about us doing this thing and being God and being this light as a people. And he says, now it's time for every single person who follows Jesus to turn outward to the many who aren't the Jewish people. Now it's time for you to go and be a light. Now it's time for you to go and serve. Now it's time for you to go and live your life and give your life for someone who's not here yet. And for these guys, it was like, what? We're gonna bring other people? What if they weren't born Abraham? He's like, it's totally different. It's a spiritual thing. When they embrace me, they join the family, and you guys are gonna be the ones that go volunteer for those many so they can all be a part of God's family. It's bigger, it's better, and it all happens through volunteers. I'm the first, you're the second, then the third, then the fourth. When Jesus says the many, when he's like the many who aren't here, he displays the heart of God and says, I care about people who aren't here yet. I care about people who don't know God. I care about people who aren't in the family, and I'm gonna volunteer so that people can get in my family. The many. I mean, just raise your hand if you care a little bit about the many. I mean, just a little bit about the many. How about the people that aren't in this room yet? You know, if Jesus in that moment would have been like, you know what? I'm not gonna think about the many, we would not be in this room right now. We wouldn't even be sitting here. But what Jesus did when he explained this, and then when he went and lived it out and died and rose from the dead, is that Christians don't seek positions. They help people. Christians don't seek positions. When you're a little Christ, which is what the word Christian means, a little follower, just someone who's trying, who's going, who's doing it, who's in the family and knows they're loved and is trying to love because they know they're loved. They don't go, I want to sit next to Jesus in glory. They have a different mind. See, you understand? The disciples of every other paradigm in the world says, put me next to the throne. Give me that position. A disciple of Jesus says, who can I help? Wow. Who can I reach out to? Who can I give my life for? Who can I spend my time with? Because Jesus was a volunteer. He laid down his life for me. I didn't even know him. He laid down his life for me. He gave it all. Who can I give to? That is the Jesus we follow. That is why we should all take a big, deep breath and ask ourselves, are we asking the right question? What can I get? What can I get is a severely non-Christian idea. What can I give represents the heart of the maker of heaven and earth. If you're in here today and you're like, you know, like, Jesus is a good person and it's a great story and I'm curious, but I'm not a Christian. I wouldn't say I'm a follower of Christ. I haven't ascribed, believe, whatever that is. You want me to share something with you? When Jesus dropped this bomb of himself in the middle of this world and this timeline, it took the ideas and the ethic and the morality and the lifestyle of God, and it wrapped itself around modern culture. And what has happened is there are a lot of people who buy into the help people part, but they don't know why. You know, there's a lot of people, millennials are marked today by service. Because even though they don't know where that came from, and it came from this, it came from Mark, it came from Jesus saying, I'm gonna serve. I'm gonna serve. I mean, God led the way. He's a lead volunteer. He's the first one to volunteer. So if you're a volunteer and you're like a hippie, whatever, beatnik, whatever it is, like, you got that from Jesus. And here's the thing that people have found about helping people is it's better. And Jesus kind of sits back and smiles and goes, it is better. And you don't know me, and actually you don't need to know me to like go help people, because like helping people is great. And I actually said in the scriptures in the book of Acts, it's better to give than to get. So when you go, even if you don't know the ultimate giver, if you go and give, you will see that it's better to give. And so like my challenge is to all of you, engage everything there is about Jesus. I think you need to engage him as a person, but if you're not there with him as a person, try helping people. Try it. Try giving time. Try giving. It'll change your life. One of the sad things about this for me is this statement right here. People are leaving the church, but they are not leaving helping people. Like, more people want to give time and energy and money and service. It's kind of in vogue almost. And what's happening is people are leaving the church. You know what that says to me? It says to me that like one of the fundamentals of Christianity has been abandoned by the church, and that is to be helpful. To be a helpful, loving group of people. What if we as a local church were just the kind of people that were like, oh, I'm going to give, man. I'm going to give my time to the church. I'm going to give my time to the community. I'm going to give, serve. I'm going to bless people because I've been given so much, and I just want to represent a little bit, little Christian, a little bit of loving people. And what if, like for a second, what if this church, everybody in here, decided to be a volunteer? What if every single person in this room decided to be a volunteer? So you're a Christian, you have no excuse. I'm sorry, just slap you on the wrist. This is like a hallmark of Jesus. You're like, I'm Jesus. I love Jesus. Oh, do you volunteer? Because like before he even died, he said that's like what he does. He's the lead volunteer. Do you volunteer? No, I don't volunteer. Well, you probably aren't a Christian. Because I mean, like if you're a Christian, you're a small Christian, and then like you would do little things that Jesus did. I mean, but what if you don't believe in that? What if you still helped and you watched smiles on people's faces because you served? You know what's cool about this passage? I'm sorry, I digress, but let me just share this. It's so cool. If you like scripture, this is one of the reasons why. It's awesome. Right after this, Jesus does one more miracle. And he heals a man who's blind. It's a metaphor. It's a picture. God goes, you see, my way is better. When you don't do things God's way, you can't see clear. One more miracle before he goes to the cross. People are blind. My way is better. Here's your sight. Do it my way. Helping people is the best way. It's the best way. Now, you're supposed to volunteer. But here's where this like cuts to the chase. Jesus did it for the many. The many who aren't here. Let me just put it this way. When you volunteer in something, you give your life to something, you just bring this wake and this inertia with you that people want to follow and people grasp. And you start to engage your world in a different way. It's the most attractive thing in the world to have someone who really wants to give. And let me just put it this way, just land this softly. Someone is absent because of your absence. There is someone who's not in the walls of this building. They don't have a relationship with the God who loves him because you have decided not to emulate the God who loves him. And when we all work as this church, you see, here's the church, right? Jesus is the head of the church, and then the church is the body, so the body should do what the head says. Isn't that funny? Jesus is the head of the church, and then the church is the body. What's the body? The hands, the feet. Serve. When we don't do this, then people don't come. People don't engage. And then when they do come, there's nobody here to love them, welcome them, change their kids' diapers, watch their kids, lead a small group, park cars. The church should be the most inviting, wonderful, beautiful place in the world, not just because we make a decision, we say, here's the 5 things on the list that you need to do when someone pulls in, but because every person standing out there goes, I'm here because of a volunteer. His name is Jesus. So I'm volunteering, and you'll be here soon. the church. Why do we need to build a building? Tell me why we need to build a building if we don't get the 232 to become 464. Why? We have 2 services. There's 800 people here today. There's room. There's plenty of room right here. Why do we need to build a $10 million building if we have room over here? There's room in the back. What's the point? What is the point? The point is for the many. You know how you reach the many? Volunteer. Give your life. Serve. And then the 232 becomes a 464. You know, it's amazing, right? It takes 232 people a week to run this church. Well, if we have 2,000 people, it's going to take a whole lot more. And they won't come if you don't take this step. Yesterday, a girl that I met years ago, she was a high school student in New Albany. Yesterday, she got married. And her name is Janelle. This is Janelle. And that's her fiance. And there's a person in our church named Jenna McCambridge, she's the wife of John McCambridge, our director of operations. She decided when she graduated from high school, and just hang with me, this is my last story. She decided when she graduated from high school, a high school kid decided this: I'm gonna volunteer for something called Young Life. And what Young Life does is it takes college students through their freshman year, it trains them, and then it puts them in local schools, in public schools. And the college students leave their college campus, and that alone is crazy. They leave their college campus. And I talked to Jenna, and she told me that she would leave Ohio State's campus and be gone for 15 hours a week because of the 3 different events that Young Life does. And what they're doing is they're going into the high school, they're meeting the kids at their games, they're talking to them, they're getting to know them, they're sharing Christ with them, they're meeting them where they are. And it costs 15 hours a week. 15 hours a week. And Jenna, I talked to her this morning, she was like, sometimes it would get so annoying. She's like, John, who was her boyfriend at the time, went to Xavier, and she would go visit him and have to leave early on her Sunday to come back and be in Bible study with Janelle. Because Janelle was one of those girls that she just happened to run into when she was leading Young Life, and Janelle was in her Bible study. And so for 3 years, Jenna volunteered. Sometimes it annoyed her, sometimes she was tired, but she would go, she would do what they call club and campaigners and share Christ with Janelle. And, you know, Jenna's in our small group, and she said many times, like, I almost got bitter because of Young Life. There's been times where she's been like, it was so hard, and, you know, what did I miss? And she knew that all these things were happening, but she just sometimes lost sight of what was so important. Yesterday, Janelle got married. And when John and Jenna walked into the wedding ceremony, one of the bridesmaids came out into the room and grabbed Jenna and said, we want you to come back here. And Jenna walked in, and Janelle, in her wedding dress, pointed at Jenna in front of all of her bridesmaids, who were girls that would not have been there unless Janelle became a Young Life leader and led all of her bridesmaids to Christ. She pointed in front of those girls and her, she pointed at Jenna and said, that girl is the reason I know Jesus. And she said, I would not be here today if she wasn't for me and here for me yesterday on her wedding day. And Jenna was like, felt embarrassed to get the recognition, but Janelle went on to say that she would not be marrying this man because this man loves Jesus, and this man was looking for a woman who loved Jesus. And Janelle said, I wouldn't know Jesus unless someone gave 15 hours a week for 3 years, volunteered, and I'm here because they were here for me. You are in this room today because of a volunteer. Is God doing anything in your life right now? That's not a rhetorical question. A little bit. You're here because God did something through someone. You know what Janelle does now? She works, I think, at an ad agency in Cincinnati, and once a week, she volunteers, goes to a prison, and preaches the gospel to women in prison. One day, one of those women is going to come out of that prison and say, I am here because of a volunteer. Imagine if Janelle didn't go to that prison. You see, someone is absent because of your absence. Jesus did it for the many. He volunteered so that people could know him. You're here because of a volunteer. Would you guys please join me in growing this number? If you're interested in like this number growing, if you're interested in being like a small, Christian, would you stand up right now? We're going to sing a song. Would you stand up? Would you think about it? Even if you're just praying about it, just thinking about it, would you stand up? If you're thinking about it, even if you're just intrigued, stand up, and can we grow this number? And if you're already a volunteer, stand up. This number needs to grow because what we do is the single most important thing that can be done, and that is share the love of God with people and how great it is. Let's all stand up and let's pray together. Father, thank you so much for how great you are, how wonderful your love is, how you, being King of Kings, did not come to be a king or consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but you emptied yourself and you took on the form of a slave, of a bondservant, so that our needs could be met. Father, we love you. We worship you. How great